Hello and welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, healer, tarot enthusiast, and professional witch, and today I'm talking about JK Rowling. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. If you love the show, the best way to support it for free is by listening daily, leaving a review, and subscribing or following in your favorite podcast app. If you're interested in crafting your own tarot cards, you can go ahead and get my full workshop, including the hour-long recording with my step-by-step method, examples of the tarot cards I've created, journaling questions, and a PDF to walk you through it for just $33. The link will be in the show notes to purchase that. I'm also going to be offering a 12-week Tarot for Transformation live course starting at the end of this summer. So if you're interested in getting more info, there's a sign up for that as well. I have just updated the Patreon benefits to be bigger and better than ever. If you want an individual card pulled for you once a month live on the podcast, join the Everyday Tarot Patreon family at the lovers level. If you'd like to support the podcast even further, you can get a one-time individual 5-card reading in addition to all the other benefits if you join the Witch Bitch level on the Patreon. If you're local to the greater Puget Sound area, join us at our next Let's Talk Tarot meetup group event. And if you're interested in joining my newsletter, you will get a free PDF with the 2025 5-card tarot spread I created just for you, my lovely listeners, at the beginning of this year. My weekly newsletter always has the most up-to-date information on upcoming events, presentations, musings, and more. And if you don't already know, I'm a sex and relationships therapist and coach, seeing clients virtually all over from my home office. I love working with queer, poly, and witchy clients. So if you'd like to work with someone that doesn't judge you, is witchy just like you, and helps you learn how to deal with anxiety, chronic pain or illness, communication issues, self-advocacy, and sex, head to my website and book a free consultation now to start your journey. You can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes or on my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot, in addition to the images of the cards I pull on each episode. All right, so welcome to season 13. Where I am talking all about divination in the Harry Potter series. If you haven't listened to my other seasons yet, you can check those out. In season 1, I talked tarot basics. Seasons 2 and 3, I went through all the major arcana cards and an overview of the 4 suits. In season 4, I talked about tarot and pop culture, where I did an episode on Harry Potter and on Professor Trelawney, which has led me to kind of do this whole season deep dive into the Harry Potter series, divination, and everything to go along with it. In season 5, I talked different 13 common tarot spreads. Season 6, 7, 8, and 9, I went through all of the suit of wands, pentacles, swords, and cups. Season 10 was all about tarot and witchcraft. Season 11, tarot and plant allies, and I just wrapped up season 12 about tarot and animals. Like I said, we are on to season 13, where I'm talking all about divination and the Harry Potter series, and today I felt the need to start it out by talking about JK Rowling. So I'll give a bit of background on myself and sort of me in the Harry Potter series. We're going to talk about JK Rowling. We're going to analyze different aspects around JKR and talk about why not to support her. Then we're going to get into some cards that I feel like depict the situation or are related to it. We'll talk about some meanings or lessons learned, and then we'll dive in and see what message the cards have to share with us today. So let's talk about me first and why I want to do a whole season on the Harry Potter series and divination. So I grew up reading all the books in elementary school, from elementary school on, and as a family, my parents actually read me the first couple of books, and then as I got older in kind of elementary school and middle school, as the books came out in the 2000s, and as I got older, I started, reading them on my own. We would still read them aloud, actually, as a family. My parents would, and I would listen, but I started reading ahead, and my mom was very impressed with me that I did not spoil some of the later books, and was able to just kind of like enjoy it as I went with my siblings. I'm the oldest kid, so my younger siblings grew up with the books as well. We actually would listen to, we had all of the books on CD, audiobook at the time. And as the books got longer, there were so many CDs per book. We actually owned them all at one point. So I grew up listening to the, to Jim Dale read the books for like the US editions. Stephen Fry read the UK edition ones, but I'm used to Jim Dale. And actually, as I'm recording this, like 2 or 3 days ago, they just announced that they're gonna do a whole new Harry Potter audiobooks, like cast, where they're going to cast all the parts and have them all record. So that will be coming soon, which will be very cool if you've ever listened to audiobooks where there's like a full cast and they do like background sounds and stuff like that, instead of basically having one person like read for everyone. So that will be very cool as well. But anyway, so yeah, I grew up reading all the books. We listened to them. Very familiar, probably like still top #1 book series in my life, I would say. More about, me and my relation to the Harry Potter series. I identify as a Slytherin. My favorite book is Half-Blood Prince. My favorite movie is Goblet of Fire. And I've been listening to a podcast about Harry Potter, MuggleCast. I've been a listener since 2006. And MuggleCast was started in 2005, where you used to have to go online and like download the RSS feed to, whatever device you could, your computer at the time. And then later I would download it onto like my iPod Touch, I think, to listen and stuff like that. But anyway, the podcast has been going now for 20 years. So very cool. Again, I grew up basically listening to podcasts, and that was part of why I was so excited to start my own as well, because I love the MuggleCast podcast. I'm still a listener. I am on their Patreon and all sorts of things. So, and then my favorite character in the books is probably Luna Lovegood. I said because I am also a weirdo. I also love how direct and also how open-minded she is. I love how she connects to Harry later in the books around grief. And yeah, I mean, I love a lot of the characters. I loved Hermione when I was younger, as well. It was very fun to see like a bookish, student girl get such, to be featured. She wasn't the main character, but in the top 3 there, and have a lot of like strong female characters, which is interesting as we go into the rest of this episode. So, JK Rowling wrote the books. Her name is Joanne Rowling. The K is not even her middle name. I believe it's her grandmother's name, Kathleen. And she says that she used that name, like JK Rowling, and the choice to use like initials only. She sort of said different things over the years, but basically because she like didn't want boys to not pick up the book because it was written by a girl. That's what I would say is like the gist of this, which again is all very interesting in the context of what we're talking about today. So she is the author, Joanne. She has written other series, but definitely Harry Potter is the one she's most well known for. She was beloved, I would say. And then I'd say the book series is still very much beloved. The movies as well. They're coming out with a TV series starting in, I think will be coming out in 2027. They're filming right now. for sort of this next generation of people to get to know Harry Potter. And JK Rowling, is a TERF, which is a trans-exclusionary radical feminist. She self-identifies this way. She has now been a very staunch TERF for years. I believe really when she started tweeting about things in 2020 was when sort of like the larger media and the fandom became sort of like couldn't really ignore anymore her dislike of trans people. Basically, trans-exclusionary radical feminist means she doesn't believe trans women are women. She likes to spout lots of stuff about biological sex and studies and things like that, that are pseudoscience. She has, at this point, has an entire, let me find the, basically like foundation or, I guess it's called a fund. In the US, it would be like a, almost like a PAC. Like PAC, that funds politicians. But yeah, anyway, so that started, or at least she was sort of very open about it 5 years ago in 2020. She was tweeting so many things, just sort of an onslaught of terrible things, and now there's a lot, especially in the UK, of TERFs like cozying up with members of the alt-right for power. So there's like a very, in the UK and certainly here in the US, a huge political push that would see trans people removed from access to healthcare. That's definitely happening here in the US. It's kind of going state by state, but also our current administration is definitely not in favor of giving trans folks any sort of gender affirming care, and also not just giving it, but like also actively taking it away. It's being, trans folks are being legally discriminated against, marginalized, higher risk of assault, murder, suicide, and all of that, even more so than they were 5 years ago. It came, I think in June, that there was an announcement that JK Rowling had formed the JK Rowling Women's Fund, which will directly impact court cases against transgender people. The cases would normally not be deemed financially viable, so the cases themselves, it's like she's basically supporting things where the case normally wouldn't be viable, but she set up a fund specifically to fund these cases. And in the press release, it says individuals and organizations that fund is designed to support include individuals who are facing tribunals. Sounds a lot like witch hunt, because of their expressed beliefs are being forced to comply with unreasonable inclusion policies regarding single-sex spaces, have issued legal challenges to legislation, which it says takes away the freedoms or protections women are entitled to, or who otherwise cannot afford to bring actions to court to defend themselves. And basically, she is solely funding this fund. It is all coming out of her own money, and she has made billions off of the Harry Potter series at this point, by doing all the books and all the merch and all the movies. And she's still going to get money from the TV show. She gets money from the Hogwarts Legacy Harry Potter game, kind of anything that is part of the intellectual property of Harry Potter. Generally, she gets some money from. And this fund does not take donations. It's literally just her, right? So we literally have very clear evidence that she is personally funding this very scary, horrifying, like onslaught of trans people. She's doing it in the UK, but because she is spouting her harm on X or Twitter as well, like it's everywhere now. And again, a lot of the fandom has in the last 5 years really like broken away from her. Is very much the idea of like, okay, John Green, the author, talks about that once a piece of art, like writing fiction, is sort of written by the author and then sent out into the world, it becomes the property of the fandom or the readers, the people that actually take it on and, you know, read it and do things in their own lives based off of what they read and all these things. And so that is definitely one point of view you can take. Like, I definitely still, like I said, I still identify as a Harry Potter fan. I have played Hogwarts Legacy, the video game. I will probably watch the Harry Potter TV show. But I think as like individuals, they have to decide, right, like where our own ethics are around giving money to her, especially knowing that JK Rowling is funding trans hatred legislatively and harm, not just hatred, but like actively taking away people's health care. And she's a billionaire, so she has a lot of money to do it. And she, yeah. So there is all of that. Where do I want to go from here? So yeah, that's sort of like about her. Like I said, I listen to Mugglecast, the podcast about Harry Potter, or a podcast about Harry Potter that's been going on for 20 years now. And they have done some episodes about, they did an episode in 2020, sort of right after all of the tweets came out and the media was kind of publishing a lot of articles about JK Rowling and her position on trans people or her own beliefs that are factually incorrect about trans people. So that in Mugglecast episode 469, which was recorded or posted in June 15th in 2020, they had an episode titled Why JK Rowling is Wrong About Trans People. So that was part of what I was referencing here. And the podcast has helped me, I would say, like figure out, right, my own ethics around this. Like some people, when the Hogwarts Legacy Harry Potter game came out, which is like an open world game, which the fandom has really wanted for a long time, where you can just fly around and explore. Like there is a plot line, but you can just kind of be in the world as well. It's also a very diverse game, and a lot of great people worked on it. And so some people chose to, okay, I'm not going to buy the game new because some of that, you know, proceeds will go to JK Rowling. I'll buy it used. So I'm not, you know, directly contributing to her pocketbook in that way. Right, there are other things you can do. Some fans choose to, right, not really identify as a Harry Potter fan at all anymore, or a fan of her. I would say the fandom is pretty strongly against her positionality. The fandom is very diverse. The fandom is very queer and trans friendly, and also a lot of folks are LGBTQIA plus, and it feels very ironic coming from a book series that was so about inclusivity and the struggles even in the wizarding world about right, like racism and hatred of other people that aren't like themselves, like that we all grew up as fans reading the books, kind of learning all these like values, and now it feels very counterintuitive that JK Rowling has chosen this sort of crusade against trans women in particular, but sort of trans people overall, especially around the healthcare aspect of it, and is very strongly she will not listen. She's no interest in being swayed, from what I can tell. And there's been sort of there was a podcast about it, like a particular series oh yeah, that was called The Witch Trials of JK Rowling, that kind of talked about, they interviewed JK Rowling herself about these topics, and then also folks in the fandom and trans people. I'm trying to remember when it came out, but it was kind of like a documentary series. What else? But yeah, so part of also why I'm doing this whole Harry Potter season right now is because I am going to Enchanticon next week for me on August 14th. Well, it starts on the 15th in St. Louis, Missouri, which used to be called LeakyCon, which was a Harry Potter specific convention. There were other sort of fandoms as well that were part of it, but even they have sort of renamed the conference to be about fantasy in general, and to not even have in name a sort of affiliation to the Harry Potter world or JK Rowling in particular, because the fandom is very against her, where she stands on this issue and how harmful she is being to trans people. And so I wanted to make sure that, right, as I do a whole season about Harry Potter and deep diving into it about divination and tarot, which I'm super excited to do, that I wanted to have an episode about JK Rowling as well, because I think it's important to, right, be intentional about where we stand, what she the hatred she is spewing and the causes and all these different things. And again, like, this has been going on since 2020, where she's been very clear about it. I would say maybe I'll talk about it more later in this season, but about maybe signs that were in the Harry Potter books about some of her hatred towards femininity. Even it's very, I don't know, it's kind of complex because so yeah, let's get into that a little bit more. So also, to kind of kick this off, recently, just like a week ago for me, I believe, yeah, it was July 31st 2025, Jinx Monsoon had a clip on an upcoming interview with Ziwi, where they were asked about whether JK Rowling would make a good Roxy Hart in Chicago, because Jinx is gonna play on a Broadway role, and Jinx talked about, I can like read the whole quote, but basically she says, like, right, there's all this irony in that JK Rowling like named herself, like tried to hide basically that she was a woman or femininity, right, in writing the books and putting her name on the books as a sort of ambiguous, like gender neutral name on the books. And now she is so against trans people living their lives, and has so much hatred towards them that it is like very, I don't know, the irony is very clear. So yeah, so Ziwe asks, you know, I'll have the clip in the show notes if you want to watch the whole thing. But yeah, she asks like, okay, you know, do you think JK Rowling would make a good Roxy Hart in Chicago? Jinx talks about, who is Jake? Who is he? Jake, hey, Rowling. Ziwa points out, oh no, Rowling's a she. And Monsoon says, oh dear, that's not a feminine name in the slightest. Then she sort of like, you know, pretending to be confused, says, oh, I know that sometimes female authors use initials so that people assume it's a male writer. And then says, oh, I have to presume that JK Rowling was unsatisfied with the way that the world saw her, and then transitioned herself in a new personality so the world would perceive her the way she wants to be perceived, which I think is very true. And she continued to do so when she went on and wrote another series after the Harry Potter series, the Cormoran Strike crime series. She used another like male pseudonym, Robert Galbraith, to do so. And she sort of says like, oh, I wanted to like distance myself. I didn't want people to just buy the books because of my famous name. But again, very interesting that she chose to have a male pseudonym, that one like much more clearly male than her original like choice around using initials that again are not even her initials. I don't think she has a middle name, and so like she sort of created this persona again, as the Jinx talks about, so that people would like perceive her a certain way. So we have that aspect, and this sort of like dragging of JK Rowling in this way, where again it's like the irony is very clear around this, where she's okay with presenting or pretending to be a man as long as it is serving her and her work, and I don't know, selling more books, or if she feels protected by that. But she is not okay with any trans people basically existing as themselves, or having any sort of transition, and she goes into again all this spewing nonsense about biological sex and how kind of like, oh, that men are going to pretend to be women to get into women's bathrooms, and like all this nonsense, where we know the data and research says that trans people are the most likely to get assaulted in bathrooms, much more than cis people, and that they are actually the ones that are very at risk a lot of the time and have a lot of violence committed against them and murder, and so this is just like a totally unacceptable and outright lie, right? That she states these things. What else do I want to say on this episode? I'll get into it a little more in next episode, where I talk about Hermione's perception of divination and Professor Trelawney, and, you know, by way of that, tarot in the books, where we're going to talk about femininity a bit more. But JK Rowling also, if you go through the books, like has a lot of, as the author, like portrays a lot of characters with hatred towards people that are like have this hyper femininity, or just femininity in general. So MuggleCast did an episode 634 analyzing the representation of women in Harry Potter. And apologies, I'm searching in the transcript right now. But anyway, they talked a lot about how, Hermione is very judgmental of Professor Trelawney and divination. She hates the subject. She drops out, and she's very like, I don't know, just kind of like has a lot of hatred about it. She sees it as, I would say, like a pseudoscience. She doesn't really believe in it. She thinks Professor Trelawney is a fake and a fraud, and that this isn't a serious subject in school, even though it is a required class for, I think, 3rd through 5th years in the school, and then for 6th year they get to opt into some of their classes out of that, but everyone is required to take divination early on, and so Hermione, that JK Rowling speaks a lot about, that Hermione is sort of like herself in the books, that this was the kind of kid she was. She highly identifies with Hermione. So it sounds like even JK Rowling is very skeptical, I would say, of divination, and right, tarot is a type of divination. Again, I'll get a little bit more into that as we go throughout the season, but divination basically just means divining the future, and there are different ways of doing divination. Tarot is one of them, and again, I'll talk a lot about different kinds of divination as we go throughout this season, and then we also have, like later in the books, we have Professor Umbridge, who again is sort of described as like a hyper femme, like wears only pink, loves cats, and it's supposed to be sort of like this in contrast to her actual, I don't know, behavior, but she has, like, JK Rowling clearly has this sort of like demonizing girlishness, like there's a lot of like women hating women in the books. There's a lot of Hermione thinks she's better than other people because, again, like she goes towards these much more serious subjects that she, quote unquote, serious, and she doesn't really believe in these ones that are more about intuition and less about learning something from a book. Hermione is very book smart, but I would say she's not necessarily super in touch with her intuition, which is seen as a like feminine trait. And what else? Yeah, and there's just a lot of, like, we have Lavender Brown later in the books that Ron dates. She's gigglish and girly, and she's seen as very, like, childish and naive and, like, again, silly, like, put down because she has this, like, girlishness. She's, like, into the romance, even with love potions and stuff. They're very much belittled in the book series, and then we actually see that they're very serious and very intense. And clearly, like, yeah, from reading the books, you would think, wow, JK Rowling hates femininity and pink and sort of all of these, like, representations of pink in the series are very negative. And then JK Rowling apparently has also gone on to said that, like, pink is her favorite color. So there's this, like, very, like, I don't know, like, shadow side to the way that she says things, and then also what she really feels. Like, I don't know. It like, there is this larger discussion, I would say, about, like, JK Rowling, like, not wanting to identify as, like, feminine again, or as this, like, hyper femme, because it is seen as, like, more silly, or that women should be serious and be more masculine and like men if they're going to be taken seriously in the world. She really, like, feeds into that, like, in the books. Again, even Petunia Dursley, you know, presents as very feminine, like the perfect 1950s housewife, but then she's also, like, I don't know, you know, like, then she's, like, very abusive and awful. So we see that a lot of these, like, hyper feminine characters, or even just ones presenting with any femininity, are, like, basically painted as evil or silly, or like more of Parvati and Lavender in the books. And there is this, like, I don't know, it just really makes me think, like, does JK Rowling hate this, like, feminine part of herself? I think she has even said that as a kid, like, she wished she was a boy, where, again, I'm like, ooh, like, girl, you gotta work with your shadow side of yourself instead of, like, so outwardly hating, right? Or just not even believing that trans people exist. And that even though, like, again, she can clearly understand for herself that, like, it is hard to be a woman in the world. She's been through a lot of, like, JK Rowling has been through domestic violence. That's a lot of what she was going through right before she wrote the book series. She was had left a abusive relationship with her young child, was very poor and was trying to survive, and that is, like, part of this part of herself that kind of, like, came up with this idea for the Harry Potter books. And yeah, it just seems like there's a lot of fear around being perceived as feminine, and that there's power in that, instead of the only power comes from being masculine, or being leaning into the power that is given directly to men. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. There's a lot there, I would say. And I wish that she could work with her, right, shadow part of self, to be in touch with her intuition, and instead of, you know, spewing hatred for trans people, because she's afraid of men, seemingly. Like, that's why she goes into all these tirades about bathrooms and things like that. That like, again, I think if she could like work on her own trauma, perhaps like she could better understand this like shadow side of herself, that actually like being feminine does not make you more, actually there's nothing wrong with being feminine, that women are often a target for violence by men, but that you can't just save yourself from that by not presenting as feminine or rejecting that part of yourself. That's not really how it works. We have to fix the culture around violence and around power. And right now, JK Rowling is enacting so much power and violence from her position of privilege. And again, instead of like interrogating her own challenges with that part of herself and utilizing her great wealth and privilege to uplift marginalized people, and protect trans people and allow trans people to choose the healthcare that they want, that they know is best for themselves, and to not create a more abusive healthcare system that is so focused on this like quote unquote biological aspect of people. Okay, I think that's where we're going to end that tirade from me. And again, like I said, I'll get more into this like femininity aspect of JK Rowling, and I'll link all the MuggleCast episodes that I'm referencing. The cards, so I think for this season I'm going to be picking cards that are sort of like the vibe, or again, sort of this like shadow side of what we're talking about. So I pulled from the Sacerobito Tarot deck today by Stasia Burrington, and I pulled the Devil, the Tower, the Eight of Cups, and the World, because this is really what I see as sort of like the story of this situation of dealing with this sort of like amazing, wonderful, magical book series that changed so many people's lives, and that was such a great force of like encouraging children to read and encouraging kids to understand diversity and the power of diversity and including other people and identifying bullying and abusive behavior and showing like what can happen when we transmute trauma into something good, or like try to like heal from it. And so yeah, let's get into that. So I picked the Devil card because, at least in this deck, it basically just depicts like a man, a very like shadowy, dark hair, dark eyes, like man. And again, the Devil card is different throughout different decks, and the Devil card really isn't usually about like a literal devil, but more about this idea of like temptation. And I think the Devil card here very much represents like JK Rowling has given into her temptation to use her narrative that like of abuse and trauma that she went through, and to like use that against people. I think she has fallen into this like seductive alt-right narrative that has of like, oh, if we just, the only way to protect yourself or protect against violence is to keep trans people out of bathrooms, which is ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, so in this card it says the devil represents desire, earthly needs, lust, and the attraction of material pleasure, right? There's also a lot of material pleasure going on for JK Rowling. She lives in like basically like a massive castle house by herself in Scotland, I believe, living off of her wealth. The devil is highly seductive. The danger here is in giving into desire to the detriment of your health, growth, and the impact on yourself and those you love. And again, I think like the fandom and the impact on the fandom has been kind of like heartbreaking. Addiction and compulsive behaviors are risks of overindulgence. The devil's temptation will appear as your great desires. The devil is everything you want, but in imbalance. The devil can lead to vice, weak will, anxiety, depression, anger, doubt, pessimism, and ignorance, which I would say are all the things that I believe she is going through right now. And on the flip side, fear of the devil will result in being too controlled, calculated, and dispassionate, restricting you from possibility and any pleasure. And I think JK Rowling has a lot of fear, again, like from her own, I would say, history with having been abused and controlled by others, in particular men in her life. And she has sort of allowed that to make her worldview very narrow. The next card I pulled was the Tower, which the Tower comes right after the Devil in the Major Arcana. If we think of sort of this as like a story, the Tower, right, is it's a violent card. It's showing often a tree or a man-made tower struck by lightning. The event is catastrophic and foundation shaking. And I think this is sort of like what happened to the fandom is like this. So JK Rowling, right, presented herself and her ideas as the devil. She doesn't see it that way, I would say, but I do. And then there was this Tower moment in the world of like, oh, this beloved author that created, again, this like amazing series and all these great things really showed herself, and it like was this disaster, sudden change, disruption, foundation shaking. It could mean danger, crisis, chaos, and hard times. It may be uncomfortable. The Tower suggests an explosive transformation, which can lead to disillusionment and an ego blow. But this also offers up liberation from old structures and revelation and freedom. The discomfort here comes from reality not conforming to expectation, right? Sometimes when we put people, right, on this pedestal of they are perfection, they created this amazing series that did all these great things, right, the reality did not totally conform to our expectation. We thought we learned things from the book because of like her own value and belief system, and I don't know if that's like true anymore, or was even true at the time. I think the sort of like millennial generation like took from the books the things that were probably the most helpful to us and the values that we maybe already embodied but saw play out in the certain way of, again, inclusion and diversity. And it says you may need a new approach to thinking about a problem. And so this really, right, again, I would say shook the fandom, was this like, again, like if you think of lightning, right, this sort of like shattering, splintering of aspects of the fandom, like people choosing to, right, never really read or think about the series ever again, or to not identify with it, to not participate in the fandom, or to kind of take back the fandom as our own and what we see it to be and its inclusionary nature and all the good things from the books, and not taking the hatred parts. Then I pulled the Eight of Cups, which the image for the Eight of Cups in this deck is someone that looks they're like naked, they look like they've been through a lot, and they're sort of like sitting down and leaning their head over, and they're like cutting off some of their hair. I also just thought this was like an interesting imagery as we talk about, again, like transition, trans people, transformation. So the Eight of Cups is generally about like exhaustion. I think of like grief, disappointment, and release. The card indicates feelings of emotional exhaustion, burnt out, abandonment, and withdrawal, which again, I think is like a lot of what people that loved the Harry Potter series felt when JK Rowling kind of like revealed this vitriol. It could mean the start of a journey of discovery spurred by overextending yourself. There may be a need to let go of material possessions to seek deeper meaning. You might be giving too much, not getting enough in return, feeling tired and listless. It may be time to let go and abandon a hopeless situation or any old ideas that are dragging you down. I find that in the past, in times of stress, I cut my hair. I feel like I'm actually disposing of the past, the extra weight, the dry ends, the old me. This is akin to shedding your skin to make room for new growth, for reinvention, and a feeling of lightness. And then finally, I pulled the World, which is the last card in the Major Arcana, because I feel like this is kind of like this full circle, like coming to the fandom, sort of recognizing, okay, like we can take the parts we want. This series is now ours. It's not hers anymore. We get to write fan fiction. We get to have discussions and conventions about the things that we value about the books and that have changed our lives or the way that we see them. And she doesn't get to decide anymore what is true and what isn't. It says the world represents the fulfillment and the successful completion of a cycle. This card shows up when the world is ready for you and wants what you have to offer. This is the last card in the Major Arcana, and as such signifies wholeness, satisfaction, and accomplishment, prosperity, and contentedness. And I think, again, this is what like we as Harry Potter book series fans had to find, was like, where can we feel content with our own ethics and values if we are going to participate in talking about the series, and again having large national annual conventions about it. How do we, kind of like find our way, and what we feel is satisfying and signifying wholeness, and kind of setting aside the parts, maybe the people, right, that we maybe used to like worship or put on a pedestal, or that we thought were kind of like the creators. Like, yes, she had the idea, she kind of created this thing, I would say, again, out of her own situation and trauma, and created this fantastical world where there's like this endless possibility. And now we get to play in the world of endless possibility, and we don't have to, reverse. This card's about being stuck in comfort zones, incomplete projects, needing to finish what you start. So it's about finding, again, like satisfaction, contentedness in where we stand in our ethics about the series and our participation in it, or our like giving of money to her or to the brand of the Wizarding World or anything like that. All right, so this is a long episode. These will probably all be long because I have a lot to say about this, but let's go ahead and pull a card and see what the message for today is that we need to learn, or anything else that we can glean from this discussion. I'm pulling from the Citadel, a Fantasy Oracle by Fen Inkwright. This felt appropriate as a very fantastical deck as we talk about this fantastical series. And this depiction of the Citadel gives Hogwarts vibes, to be honest. On the back of the card, there's like a city that's depicted, and it looks kind of like Hogwarts. Okay. I pulled the Enchanter, but I pulled it in reverse. So it says it's about deception and trickery. Okay, let's see here. Pointing up. Okay, reversed. The Enchanter reversed addresses the repairing of relationships after a deception comes to light. Wow, how appropriate. You or someone you know may have had the truth of their deceit revealed, willingly or not. Losing them the trust of others, now is the chance to work together to reach a state of reconciliation. And again, I think that is really where the fandom is at. I know I enjoyed going to LeakyCon last year in 2024 in Portland, Oregon, and hearing all these discussions about how to sort of take back the fandom as our own, how we personally and as a fandom like interrogate these aspects that are in the series that are more challenging or that do sort of come up against our values of diversity and inclusion. And also just like the grief, right, of like the Eight of Cups card of like that deceit being revealed, right? I think it sort of felt like, oh, we read these books and I thought I learned these things because, again, the author was so open-minded and inclusionary and all these things. And it's like, oh, come to find out, like, no, maybe in some ways and maybe for the time period it was in. But now we're in this place where like it has transcended what was depicted in the books. And also just like we've moved on as a culture, I would say. I guess not all of us have because of our current politics, and current administration. But yeah, this is a very interesting card to pull, right? That being being enchanted and sort of thinking that it's all one way and then feeling deceived, and how that makes us feel stupid instead of realizing that, right, like abusers will deceive and manipulate to get what they want, and that really that's not our fault if we believed them, because we should be able to believe what people say if they are being authentic, instead of trying to suss out every person in the world and their motives. All right, we'll end there for now. In closing, if you'd like to join me on the journey of using the tarot for transformation, you can click on the link in the show notes to indicate your interest. We'll be working together for 12 weeks of calls and journaling and lots more to discover what happens when we want to transform our lives through the tarot. Links for the tarot decks I talk about will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast will come out daily, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. And you can email me, me@CamilleASaunders.com with your thoughts, questions, and more. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.